This is Lauren Burke. This is Lauren Live. I'm off camera tonight because I have a lighting issue. I have a light that went out. But at any rate, I am here starting a little bit early to talk about some signs that the MAGA movement is in some trouble. You can kind of see it throughout November, which was probably easily the worst month for Donald Trump this year. A whole lot of losing. That really starts with what happened in Virginia and New Jersey on the 4th of November. And I would say particularly Virginia, because in Virginia, they have a historic lead, a historic amount of losses, really, for the Republicans, realizing that the Republicans used to control the Virginia House for so many years by a lot. And now what's going to happen next year, starting in January, there will be 64 Democrats out of 100 seats in the Virginia House. That hasn't happened since the 1980s. That was really the first sign of trouble, really a backlash, I would say, against Donald Trump. And of course, in New Jersey, the governor's race in both states, in New Jersey and Virginia, of course, went with the Democrats. In the case of Virginia, all the statewide offices went to the Democrats, as they did in 2017 after Donald Trump showed up. So it was really a redo of that. That whole Virginia, New Jersey situation was a redo. Now we've got a situation where in Tennessee, there's a House seat that's going to be up, I think it's next week or the week after. That's a consequential thing because Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, announced her resignation last week, but I'll get to her in a minute. Another sign, I think, the MAGA era, one of the three signs that I think it's coming to an end is there's a lot of federal judges, as I talked about in the episode last night, a lot of federal judges are deciding that they are going to stand up against the Trump regime, and they are standing up against the Trump regime, and they're starting to lose court cases big time. Big time. And you see that not only in sort of individual cases on various issues involving the Constitution, involving ICE, but you sure as hell saw it this week with regard to Jim Comey and Tish James. That was a huge, big, mega loss for the administration because the entire point of those cases, of course, was vindictiveness coming from Donald Trump, aimed at two people that he doesn't like.
This is against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland has the latest.
A major defeat for the Trump administration here and for the U.S. Department of Justice. In one single blow, a federal judge has knocked down and dismissed two high-profile criminal cases, one against the former FBI Director James Comey, another against New York's top law enforcement official, the Attorney General Letitia James, but both on the same grounds. The judge ruled the U.S. attorney appointed just recently in September and who was handling these two cases was unlawfully appointed, and therefore the cases collapse. Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney who was a Trump White House aide as recently as September, was appointed in September and promptly brought these two cases against political critics of President Trump.
Yeah, political critics of President Trump sort of puts it mildly. He's going after anybody he doesn't like. Now they're going after members of Congress, as they were doing before. They went after Congresswoman MacGyver in New Jersey, as they continue to. Now they're going after a group of members of Congress who said something that was just true, which is that members of the military are not to obey unlawful orders. Anybody who watched the movie A Few Good Men would know that. And you notice that there's an extremely strong reaction from the Trump administration with regard to members of Congress in any way getting into the conversation about how the military should react to Donald Trump. That is really interesting to think about because you can tell that controlling the military is a major part of his strategy and a part of his presidency. Now, what does that tell you? There's a lot of speculation about whether or not that means that they're going to try to execute something around the 2026 elections. I wouldn't put it past them because why not? You know, the brazenness of it all. But it is interesting the strong reaction from the Trump administration to anybody suggesting that the military doesn't have to obey illegal orders coming out of the president of the United States. And they don't want to hear that, of course. Donald Trump does not want to hear that. What they want to hear is that we can do whatever we want. We can tell anybody anything that we want. Everybody has to do what we say, and that's it. And these members of Congress put out a video and basically challenged all of that and told the truth in terms of, as members of the military, you swear to the Constitution, you don't swear to an individual politician. And that is not that is meeting with a strong reaction. Now you have the FBI getting involved, saying they're going to investigate these members. It is absolutely outrageous. There will be major pushback against that. And I think a lot of these Republicans who are sitting silent are not in agreement. They, in fact, and I think that the fact that they're not in agreement will be shown right around, I would say January, mid-January, which is when you start getting filing deadlines for 2026 in a lot of states and a lot of places. Some of those filing deadlines are in December. And so there's been some reporting that there's going to be a bunch of members of Congress who are going to resign on the Republican side. That would be very, very unsurprising because this is an incredibly uncomfortable institution to work in right now. And of course, last week, one of the more prominent people was Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia.
Which is why I've always been despised in Washington, D.C., and just never fit in. Americans are used by the political industrial complex of both political parties, election cycle after election cycle, in order to elect whichever side can convince Americans to hate the other side more. And the results are always the same. No matter which way the political pendulum swings, Republican or Democrat, nothing ever gets better for the common American man or woman. The debt goes higher. Corporate and global interests remain Washington's sweethearts. American jobs continue to be replaced, whether it's by illegal labor or legal labor by visas or just shipped overseas. Small businesses continue to be swallowed by big corporations. Americans' hard-earned tax dollars always fund foreign wars, foreign aid, and foreign interest.
Now, this is very interesting on so many fronts. A lot of people think that this is fake. I think this is just fatigue. I also think it's the fact that her pension does, in fact, vest on the day that she's leaving. And that is a huge advantage for her. She's been in Congress for 5 years. I think a lot of people will remember that Marjorie Taylor Greene was really just full of spectacles back when she first came in, interrupting Joe Biden as he was giving the State of the Union, wearing a MAGA hat on the floor of the House, always trying to court attention. The narcissism is really high there. One of my videos that's going to be coming up is one on just how ridiculous it is that these people are that come into Congress and make $174,000 a year and then spend a few years and then disappear. It's like the only job you could ever have where you can show absolutely no results and still get paid. But this is a really interesting moment because if she resigns earlier, actually, it doesn't really matter whether she does it earlier or January. She's not going to do it earlier. She's going to do it on or after the date of her pension vesting, which is in January. It brings the House a Republican total to 218. And should that go under 218, there are going to be some very interesting moments. Okay. And, it could go under 218 because things are extremely unpredictable. And I just thought it was interesting, this whole statement, this whole rollout, and of course, her whole change of heart. And of course, this happens right after the Epstein files, which I'll get to in a minute, which, of course, she was criticized on from the president, and of course received a bunch of death threats, which is the way President Trump does things, is he threatens people through his supporters.
And the spending power of the dollar continues to decline. The average American family can no longer survive on a single breadwinner's income, as both parents have to work in order to simply survive. And today, many in my children's generation feel hopeless for their future and don't think they will ever realize the American dream. And that breaks my heart.
Now, this is so interesting because she's voted against every bill that would do the things that she just talked about, particularly during Joseph Biden's time in office. He passed a bunch of stuff that would have been quite helpful on all of those fronts, and in fact, was helpful. Marjorie Taylor Greene voted against it. So, yeah, I don't know what people are thinking when they come to Congress. You want to swear allegiance to Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't, or really the Republican Party generally doesn't want to really do anything for apparently anybody in the United States, with all this money going to Argentina and the Middle East and Ukraine, you name it. Tax money always seems to be going out of the country into the billions, which she did mention. And yet nobody says anything. Nobody really says anything. They just sort of vote for it, and that's about it.
I ran for Congress in 2020 and have fought every single day believing that Make America Great Again meant America first. I have one of the most conservative voting records in Congress, defending the First Amendment, Second Amendment, unborn babies, because I believe God creates life at conception, and I love to fight for the little guy. Strong, safe borders, I have fought hard for that. I've fought against COVID tyrannical insanity and mandated mass vaccinations, and I've never voted to fund foreign wars with your hard-earned tax dollars. However, with almost 1 year into our majority, the legislature has been mostly sidelined. We endured an 8-week shutdown, wrongly, resulting in the House not working for the entire time. And we are entering campaign season, which means all courage leaves and only safe campaign reelection mode is turned on in the House of Representatives.
No kidding. So, this is number two. So, number one thing that we saw for Trump's MAGA movement that was, I think, a sign that this is the beginning of the end was New Jersey and Virginia. The number two thing is something like this. You have a MAGA Republican member of the House announcing that she is leaving and is likely to be followed by many, many more. Many more. I think a lot of these members feel confined. They're uncomfortable supporting this president. They're uncomfortable supporting a lot of his policies because they can't be explained. And so now that you're probably going to see a mass exodus of Republican House members, knowing full well they're about to get rolled in the 2026 elections. They are about to get rolled. There's just no doubt about that. And so now you go into 2026. If you are a Republican, you know that you can very easily end up in the minority in 2027. And this is where you start to see the exodus. So the two signs that the MAGA movement is starting to fall. One, of course, is New Jersey and Virginia, and the second is a mass exodus. What I think we're going to see a mass exodus of Republican House members, and that would be predictable, either way, because let's face it, the other thing, and I think the third big thing, I'll put the Lindsey Halligan in there also as a thing. I do think that the disaster that was Lindsey Halligan and these judges deciding, hey, we've had enough of this, and they're starting to really stand up and not buckle and not just say, okay, we're just going to go along with Donald Trump. Of course, that does not include the Supreme Court, as we're about to find out, on voting rights and likely some other issues. The Supreme Court and Alito and these people are in there playing politics, really. And so that is going to always be there. But judges on other levels are quite a different story. They're not just going to go along with the program and then that's it. The third thing I would say that is a sign that the Trump MAGA era is starting to end is, of course, the case of Jeffrey Epstein, which never dies, never goes away. And then when you think it's over, it comes back. And why? Because there's so many people involved. There's a ton of people involved. And that just never goes away. And and now we're finding out, of course, that President Trump has mentioned numerous times in the Epstein documents. Now, whether or not these documents are going to come out when they're supposed to come out after, Trump signed the bill with regard to the files being released after the discharge petition vote in the House and Senate was successful. He did sign it. But I suspect they are going to throw up some sort of barrier with regard to just saying that there's an ongoing investigation and the Epstein files can't come out. But this is a third bit of evidence that The MAGA era is ending.
The secrets of Jeffrey Epstein remain tightly guarded. But earlier this year, I spearheaded a Wired investigation that uncovered the data of almost 200 mobile phones belonging to visitors to his infamous pedophile island. The data was so precise, we were able to map the paths of these visitors to within centimeters, including their neighborhoods, buildings of origins, and the paths they took to get to the island. These digital trails document the numerous trips of wealthy and influential individuals, seemingly undeterred by Epstein's status as a convicted sex offender.
So now this is an investigation that Wired did. Wired did this whole thing of tracking people going to and from the island. You know, it never ends. I mean, it just never ends. And once you get more documents, you get more text messages, you get more files, you get more records, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Several news organizations are creating databases of the Epstein files. Zateo by Mehdi Hassan, the Hill newspaper, I think Courier News is another one. They're creating databases, and ProPublica, I think, was the first one to do it. ProPublica is, of course, incredible. The point here is, this to me is the beginning of the end. It's something that had split the Republican Party in half, the MAGA side and the sort of traditional Republican side in half, and it just continues to be a problem. The Epstein files keeps coming up again and again and again. They never seem to go away. It never seems to get quiet. It's just there. And I just feel like this thing is a turning point, as are the other two things: a mass Republican exodus and huge signs that the voters have had enough. Of course, what goes along with that New Jersey, Virginia example are the polls. The polling for Donald Trump is absolutely atrocious. His poll numbers are an absolute disaster. See if I can find something on that for a second. And they're a disaster for obvious reason, which is simply that people are figuring out that these policies don't work. And once people see that, they've had it. They've had enough. And his polling numbers are plummeting. His polling numbers are absolutely plummeting. I don't know how you're not fixing that, because what fixes that is something that you do in policy. There is some talk about a healthcare related policy that might come out. I tend to doubt that that's going to happen. And of course, there's pushback by Republicans in the House against that, which is quite interesting. But once again, the bottom line of all of this is that Donald Trump spent all of November losing, and losing big on a lot of fronts. And I just think this is it. This is the turning point. You have evidence of it at the ballot box in Virginia and New Jersey, and you're about to have even more evidence when Republican House members start to resign in droves. I mean, they are definitely just pawns in the game of the White House. They realize that, and they're going to leave. And it's going to increase the chances that the Democrats are going to get the majority in January 2027. Obviously, with all those retirements and all the resignations and the lack of incumbents sitting around, they're going to have a better shot at it. And that is something that there's no stopping that. You can't make people run for office. So the Tennessee race is coming up. Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation and departure from Congress is coming up. And these are all signs going in the same direction, that this MAGA thing is starting to end. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. This is Lauren Burke. I'll be back tomorrow. There may be a Tech Tuesdays on this show, because I like to talk about gear. And I have like a gear platform called Gear List. And anybody who does a channel membership can get a free subscription lifetime for Gear List. And of course, you can bail anytime you want. But that is part of the channel membership. And I changed, by the way, all the channel memberships. The channel memberships needed to be completely altered, and they were. And I think they're a lot more fun than they were. And channel memberships are a lot of fun in a lot of ways, and can provide for some freebies every now and then. And I plan to throw down some freebies with regard to the channel memberships. But at any rate, this is Lauren Live. And I will be back tomorrow. I think we will do a show on Shador Sanders and black men in the NFL. If not tomorrow, there's a few people that I like on that show. I don't know if they're available. If they're not, I'll move it to Saturday or Friday. And we'll go from there. And this is Lauren Burke, and I will be back very soon.